Okay, so I told you I would show you another method for factoring quadratics. So here it is. It's called the split the middle method. And like we did in class, we'll start with two binomials. We'll multiply them to produce a quadratic. And then we'll see if we can go backwards to get those binomials. And we'll try to actually do the steps backwards instead of just guessing and checking. Okay, so let's multiply this out. So and then we combine like terms to get the middle term. And we want to see if we could start with that quadratic and actually find a step that will allow us to do this, to get to that step, and then from that step to go on to that. Okay, one step at a time, but backwards. So we'll actually write it out backwards even this time. We'll start down here and we'll go up the page and see if we can make this work. Okay, and the method we'll use is here in purple over here at the right. This is the split the middle method. We first find two numbers that multiply to a times c and add to b. Now that's different. In the past we just found numbers that multiply to c, right? So this is a different method. Numbers that multiply to a times c and add to b. And they have to add to b because of step 2. We're going to use those numbers to split the middle term. So it won't be negative 18x. We actually want to split it into those two terms, okay? And we hope the numbers we choose will work. Okay, so they do have to add to b, right? And they have to add to negative 18x, or negative 18, so we can split the negative 18x into those two terms. Okay, so, and then once we do that, we do something called factoring by grouping. And that will take us from this step to this step. Okay, so let's see if it can make this work. Find the numbers that multiply to AC and add to B. So AC, I'll write up here what AC is, A times C. A is 5, C is negative 8, so multiply those, it's negative 40. And B is negative 18. So, I already said we're going to use those to split the middle, so we kind of can look up there and see what they are, but we'll pretend we don't know that. Numbers that multiply to negative 40, so we can write negative 40 here, and they have to add to negative 18. So one will be positive, one will be negative, right? So that they multiply to make negative 40. So we can use numbers like 10 and 4. But that's not going to add to negative 18, right? No matter what we do. We could make the biggest one negative. The biggest one will be negative, right? Because they have to add to negative 18. But that won't work. So they need to be numbers that are farther apart. So how about 20 and 2? Yeah. Make that negative 20 plus 2. That is negative 18. Okay, so it does take a little work, but this is not guessing and checking. This is just finding the numbers, right? They multiply to negative 40 and add to negative 18. We have found them. So now we split the middle term using those two numbers. Okay, those two numbers right there to split the middle term. And notice we did not have to look up here to find those numbers. We just had to find two numbers that multiply to negative 40 and add to negative 18. We found them. They're right here. So we split the middle term. So of course we put x with those numbers, right? That's what we mean by splitting this out. It's negative 18x, but we are writing it as negative 20x plus 2x, because that does add to negative 18x, of course. So, let's see, I need to erase something here. Okay. So, I wrote equals 8. That should have been minus 8. I knew that didn't look right. Okay, put it back in there correctly. Okay, so now we've gotten to this step. We're trying to go backwards. We just need to go back to that. And we do that by factoring by grouping. We put these into two groups. We could put boxes around them. You don't have to, but to start out with, you can. We take the greatest common factor from each group. So we know how to take out the greatest common factor, right? What's the greatest common factor in that first group, 5x squared minus 20x? Well, as far as the numbers are concerned, it's 5, right? We can take a 5 out of both terms. 5 comes out of 5x squared. 5 can also come out of negative 20x. As far as the variables, well, there is an x in each of them, but the one with the smallest exponent is right there with the exponent of 1. So we can only take out 1x. Okay, and when we factor that out of each of those, we get, factored out of the first term, it leaves x. 5x squared divided by 5x is x, and negative 20x divided by 5x is negative 4. Okay, and then we put plus here because that's what we have down here. If that was minus, we would put minus. And we find the greatest common factor in the other group, the 2x minus 8. Well, as far as the numbers go, that's 2. For the x, we cannot factor an x at all out of the negative 8. So we can't factor out x. You have to be able to factor out of both of them, right, to factor it out. So we can't factor out any variable. So now we go ahead and write what goes in parentheses. Divide the 2x by 2 first, right? And that is x. And then divide negative 8 by 2, and that is negative 4. So have we made any progress? Well, now we can actually factor out this x minus 4. And look, here's x minus 4 right here. In fact, when we multiplied this, what did we do? Going back to multiplying these binomials, we took the 5x and we distributed it, right? And multiplied it by x minus 4. We took times x and also times minus 4, but that is the same thing as here, right? 5x times x minus 4. Okay, just like up here, 5x times, we end up multiplying it, of course, distributing it, multiply it by x minus 4. And 2, then, we take 2 and we multiply it by x minus 4. So if we look at what we have at this step, we can factor out this x minus 4 from each. We could think of this as a term. Okay, and this sort of like a term, with the x minus 4 being something that can factor out of each of those. So we factor x minus 4 out of the first one, it leaves 5x. We factor x minus 4 out of the second one, it leaves 2. And that's it. We went backwards. And, starting with the trinomial, we went to this with the split terms, which is this right here. And then we went to that all the way. We got it. Now, of course, we usually won't write them going up the page. But these are the steps that work. And there's no guess and check. You just do have to find the factors. But once you do, you just factor by grouping, and you got it. So let's do one more. And of course, if you think you don't need to see another one, that's fine. You can just stop the video at that point. But let's go ahead. If you want to watch one more, I think we did this one in class as well by guess and check. Okay, so by the AC method, or split the middle method. It's sometimes also called the AC method. So we find numbers that multiply to, what is A times C? 3 times negative 10. That's negative 30. And then they add to negative 13. Okay, so what are those numbers? Well, we can look at negative 30, look at the numbers that multiply to make that, and one will be negative, one will be positive. So we could try negative 10 and 3, but we add those together, we only get negative 7, right? The bigger number will be negative because they have to add to a negative number. But these aren't far enough apart, so of course we'll try negative 15 and 2. So those add to make negative 13. So these are the numbers that multiply to negative 30 and add to negative 13. So now we split the middle using those. Okay, so negative 15x and positive 2x. And that indeed does add up to negative 13x, right? Negative 10 is still there. Now we factor by grouping. So from that first group, we factor out the greatest common factor. As far as the numbers, we can factor out a 3. For the variables, we can factor out x. When we factor that out of the first term, it leaves just x. We factor it out of the second term, we get negative 5, right? Because negative 15x divided by 3x, negative 5. We have plus, and from these terms, we can only factor out a 2. And that leaves x minus 5. Always check these, right, real quick. 2 times x is 2x. 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. That looks good. So now we look at this and thinking of this as sort of like a term and this is a term. We factor out the x minus 5 that's in parentheses. So take it out to the front, and that leaves, when we factor it out of this term here, it leaves 3x. We factor it out of this one over here, it leaves plus 2, and that's it. Okay, this is our answer. Now we can check it just to make sure it's right, but this is not guess and check. There's no guessing here. We found the numbers and we split the middle and we factored by grouping, so this should be correct. It'll only be wrong if we made a mistake somewhere. X times 3x, 3x squared. X times 2 is plus 2x. Negative 5 times 3x, negative 15x. Negative 5 times 2 is negative 10. 3x squared minus 13x minus 10. And it checks because it is the same as that. So that's it. It does take a little time, but it's something that you just follow the steps. Once you find those numbers, it just works.